And we're live. Mr. David Jenyns, welcome. It's good to have you on, my friend.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks for having us, James. Looking forward to it.
My pleasure, man. This is a cracker book, absolute cracker book. I love what you've done here, and I'm pretty pumped to dive into this. You've done some cool shit, man. Like when I was, for
Thank
everyone
you.
who's listening, I was introduced to Dave by two people, actually, a bloke called Charlie Valla, another guy called Kim Barrett, two guys I hold in very high esteem. And they said, this guy's cool. You got to talk to him. I was like, all right, well, I've heard that a million times before. I'll go into him. I was like, but David, you sold the MCG. And I was like, I read that and I was like, that's weird. That's a little bit unusual. Can you go into like how you got about to selling the MCG?
Yeah. Well, it started off reading a book, and I was reading a book about a guy called Paul Hartunian who sold the Brooklyn Bridge. And it told this story of how this guy got his hands on a bunch of discarded pieces of wood from the Brooklyn Bridge when they were doing some renovating. So I just read that book, and then I was driving past the MCG, and they were doing renovations on the MCG. There's a big gaping hole in one side of it where the Ponsford stand was. And I was driving through my little red laser, and I remember the moment. It was like fireworks went off in my brain, and I thought, oh, I could just do exactly what this guy just did and copy his system, his exact approach for the way that he sold the Brooklyn Bridge. And basically what he did and what I did, I got my hands on pieces of they had green wooden seating, which is really iconic for the MCG. And also they had this MCC crested carpet, and it looked pretty awesome with the logo kind of all stenciled in. And I ended up kind of chasing up who the wrecker was, and was standing in this big old dusty warehouse and took a big pile of the wood and the carpet. And I said, at the time, it was a bit funny. I said, I'm going to come back for that big roll you've got there. And they had this huge roll of carpet, and I only took as much that I could fit into my dad's car at the time. And I got home, I started kind of writing out a press release, again, just modeling what this guy, Paul Hartunian, did. I literally wrote the press release, Melbourne man sells the MCG for $24.95. And I had the visions of me chopping up the wood into little pieces, and I went down to Officeworks and bought the certificate paper, and I'm sticking it onto the certificate paper with the little gold seal, and the plan was to sell that for $24.95. And the next day, so I kind of started painting this picture in my head of what was going to happen. And the next day I went back to the wrecker, and I said, oh, I'll grab that big roll. And they said, oh, someone came in yesterday actually and bought that last big roll of carpet. And I thought, oh, that's a little bit odd. And they said, oh, the guy said he was going to use it to line his pool room floor. And I didn't give much of a thought after that to it. And I started telling a couple of friends what I had planned, and I was booked in to go to this conference in Queensland. And I thought, well, before I send this press release out, I want to be in Victoria when it actually happens. So I'll wait until after the conference, and when I get back, then I'll send the press release out. And I flew up, started doing the conference, and then I started getting these texts and phone calls from a couple of friends that I told what I was going to do. And they said, did you tell this idea to anybody else? And I was like, no. And they said, there's a guy, he's 21, he's down here, he's on the news, and he's doing exactly what you were planning on doing. And I remember at the time, I felt gutted. Like I felt like, this was my one big opportunity of a lifetime, and someone had kind of stepped in and beat me to the punch. And I was just stewing over it up at this conference. I'm sitting in the room. I can hardly think of anything else. And I'm just, they had, because the conference, the guy who was running it, Brad Sugars, sent out a book beforehand, which is called The 1 Minute Millionaire. And that was the book that gave me the idea for Paul Hartunian. And then they ran a competition at this conference, and they said, has anyone taken what they learned from the book and applied it? And they got everybody to stand up and tell their story. And I started telling the MCG story, and I said, I've got my hands on all of this, and it's sitting at home, and I'm going to do it when I got back. And someone in the audience said, I've just heard someone's doing that on the news from someone back home. And it was just like, this was my idea. And that's what it felt like. And I got to the end of the conference, got back home, and then I just thought, look, what else am I going to do? I've got this big pile of wooden carpet sitting in mum's garage. I might as well just keep doing it. So I wrote a little news article that I ran in MX magazine, which is like a thing they handed out on the trains. And
I remember MX back in the day when I was a poor uni student. Yeah.
So the old MX magazine, and I just copied the press release, which was Melbourne Mansell's the MCG for $24.95, and paid to run the ad. And then it's like the media confused me or something, or got Pete and I mixed up, who was the other guy who did it. And I had the Herald Sun contact me, and then I got on the Today Show, and then I got on Nova Radio, and then I kind of still managed to kind of get part of this, the snowball that was happening, because it was only within a week or two. And I kind of turned that, what felt like at the time, those lemons into lemonade, and sold a truckload, sold out of the carpet. Still got a big pile of the wood sitting at mum's. But that was kind of like
mum's stoked with that.
Yeah, I know. That's right. Sitting in the garage, collecting dust.
How much did you make out of that, out of selling all that stuff?
Yeah, look, it would have been about $100,000. And then I sold out of the carpet. The carpet's where the money was, because I was selling these frames for like $1,000. And the little pieces were quite small, thin slithers. So who knows? I probably got another $100,000 sitting at mum's still. If I kept on chopping it up, I need to do like the 20-year anniversary or something. But Pete, actually, the other guy who sold the MCG, actually became my arch nemesis as well at that point in time. I kind of just saw him as, ultimate evil and, my arch rival. And then he just started popping up everywhere, and I saw him at some conferences, and cut a long story short, we ended up becoming really good friends, and found out we were similar in a lot of different ways, not just selling the MCG. And he had me do like a little reading at his wedding, and I did a reading at his wedding, and he did a reading at my wedding. And it was kind of funny how it all kind of played out.
Yeah, definitely, man. Definitely. And I think like another one of the cool things you told me about, which I learned about you, was you do jiu-jitsu as well. So
Yes.
not only are you a systems guy, but you also love strangling men, or what we call that what I've heard some good terms for it. It's like involuntary yoga, or the art of folding clothes with people still in them. You actually did pretty well, mate. You did well. You went over to ADCC, is that right?
Yes,
You did that.
Or the pan packs in Victoria. Look, if we're gonna make a confession, I kind of feel like this is the podcast to do it. I do have a little confession to make. I fell in love with jiu-jitsu. It must have been the UFC was like USC 5 and 6, and like the Gracies were, in their heyday, and I was watching them crush everybody, and I'm thinking, yeah, this is what I want to do.
Old, man. You are old.
Back in 99, and I was just at school, and I started doing jiu-jitsu, and did it for a couple of years in final years of school, and then ended up, they had the Pan Pacifics on in Victoria, and I thought, I'll go along to that, and I competed, and when I got there were actually only 3 competitors, because it was so early days jiu-jitsu, and no one else was around. There was just 3 other people, and I ended up getting a silver medal for the Pan Packs, but there were only 3 of us. Like that's the big reveal.
Keep that to yourself.
I've not really told anyone that. Usually I'll go, oh yeah, I've got a silver medal at the Pan Packs, but yeah, there were only 3 of us, so that's kind of like the dirty secret of that. But then I took like 10 years off, and life got in the way. And last couple of years, I just gotten back to it, and I had just got, when at the end of the Pan Packs, I got my blue belt, and then I retired for 10, 15 years. And now that I've come back, I thought, oh yeah, I'll go back as a white belt. So I'm happy to announce on the podcast here, I've just got my blue belt again. So there was a bit of a joke around the gym that I was, even while I was on the white belt, I'm blue belt Dave, because I used to be blue belt, but then demoted myself because I felt like I had too long off.
Oh, dude, you need it, right? If you go back, like the rate at which jiu-jitsu progresses is insane, and the rate at which you regress if you're not doing it is crazy.
Yeah.
But so you had 10, 15 years off, because obviously you were a little bit busy running a business or two.
Yes.
One thing I noticed is you've also done a TED Talk, right? How was that? Because
That was
that's pretty
pretty
fucking cool, man.
wild. Yeah, look, I have this thing, and it happens all the time where some little crazy opportunity falls in my lap, and then I just follow it, and I just go, "Oh, this is odd." So I had an email from a guy from Amsterdam, or just outside of Amsterdam, and it was into my Hotmail address. This was, obviously my email had been scraped from LinkedIn, and it was my Hotmail address. And this random person contacted me and said, "Oh, look, I am on this student council for this TEDx thing, and I was asking my dad who I should get to come and speak at the TEDx and put forward, because we each needed to put forward this nomination, and he said you." And I was I was like, "That's a bit random." And he said, "Oh yeah, my dad saw some video of you on YouTube talking about stock market stuff, and he said you look like you were interesting and up to some interesting stuff. So I thought I'd just reach out to you." And his email came through from, it was like a Gmail, and it wasn't from official TEDx. And I was kind of like, is this some sort of phishing scam? And I'm contacting the TEDx board and just making sure that it all kind of checked out. But yeah, that was a bit of a fun ride. I kind of responded back, had a couple of chats, and then went over and did that. And it was just right place at the right time. Like I was just launching all of my systems thinking stuff. And I thought, oh, what a great way to culminate a lot of thinking and launch that business. And it was a bit like there's a lot of work and very little immediate payoff for a TEDx talk. Like they pre-screen you, you've got to work with them with the outline. I had to hop on Zoom and do practice runs and a bunch of stuff like that all the way through. And then they basically say, "Oh, and by the way, you have to pay for your flights to get over here, and you can't sell anything. There's no commercial intent in a TEDx." But again, it was just one of those things where I thought, yeah, look, I'll just follow it and see it where it goes. I'm really glad I did it. Hard to quantify what the commercial benefit was other than the experience, but I'm sure it's played a part.
Yeah, totally. I mean, for brand, right, it's second to none. If you can say you got a TEDx, so it was what you've got like 60,000 views or something like that. It's like, that's a pretty cool thing for your brand. And I mean, because you're known as the systems guy, and no offense, systems aren't generally known as the sexiest things. Like when you see people selling stuff, I know, I'm sorry, I'm just being honest, but when you see people selling stuff, they're like marketing, sales, make more money, this, and you're like systems. So how did you get to be the systems guy?
Yeah. It's funny with this systems not being sexy. Way back when I used to be interested in sort of the stock market education space, that was like one of my things around the same time I was doing the MCG stuff. I was really interested in the stock market stuff. And I always found with the stock market stuff, everybody wanted to know, what's the buy signal? What's the sell signal? And one of the most important components, which no one ever looked at, was the trading psychology. And the trading psychology always sort of triggered my interest. And now I feel like I'm almost, Groundhog Day repeating that again. Like I'm interested in business and people want to know, what's the latest marketing tactic and strategy? How do I sell more people and high ticket sales? And I'm kind of saying systems really feels like it's the building block of all great businesses. And I feel like that's the sexy bit. And I feel like it is. So it's funny though, when I talk to someone who is a systems person, we get it. It's kind of like you're either a systems person or you're a not. And if you are, you kind of immediately click to the message. And I realized out of all of my businesses, they all have had these undertones of systems and the way that I built it. And like my dad was a systems engineer, so I've had some early programming that came from him, and he used to create fun little systems to gamify life for my brother and I. And I took that to the businesses that I ran, all except I got to my last business, which was the one before I'm running right now, the digital agency. And I threw all of it out the door. And I was kind of like, this business is different. This is a creative digital agency. And why would I put systems in place when Google's just going to update their algorithm? And, half of my team were, writing copy and thinking about YouTube thumbnails and making things pretty and building websites. They're not going to want to follow a system. I had the secret magic from the SEO. You know, I delved deep and figured out Google and all the rest of it, and I thought, oh, it couldn't be replicated. So I ended up just building this business around me and coming to the conclusion that it couldn't be systemized, and that kind of held me in that business probably, I don't know, good 10 years too long, until we found out we were pregnant, and then I thought, I got to figure out how to not be working a million hours a week. And I then looked back at my other businesses, looked at some other successful agencies, and I thought, this can be systemized. And I went on that journey. I pulled everything that I could from the previous businesses that I'd done, and we ended up getting a CEO, recruited her from internally, or promoted her rather. And then I took some time off while we had our two sons, and she ran the business. And that for me was kind of like a huge catalyst to kind of go, oh, this can be done. A lot of people struggle with this. I even knew systems were the way, yet I lost my way. Maybe I can figure out how to bottle this. And again, just different things fall into place at different times. I just finished systemizing Melbourne SEO, and we took some time off for the kids. And then I get a random email out of the blue from Mrs. Gerber, which is Michael Gerber's wife, who wrote the seminal book in the space, The E-Myth. He's like considered the godfather of business systems. And his wife contacted me for a completely unrelated matter, and said, did I want to do some work with Michael Gerber? And I was like, yeah, I followed that. And then I think that really kind of
So she just randomly messaged you out of the blue.
Yeah. How random is that? And there's probably 3 or 4 circumstances or memories like that in my life where I've had a random email or message come through that I've responded to that has set off a chain reaction. You know, whether it's responding to that TED talk or responding to Luz Delia Gerber. She emailed me, and actually, there you go. It was the same. It's the same reason. I didn't even think of that. It's the same reason that the TED talk person contacted me. She said, I saw some videos of you on YouTube, and I saw what you were doing with one of your earlier book launches. I had 2 books. My first book was Authority Content. I loved what you did, and Michael is launching the last book in his E-Myth series called Beyond the E-Myth. Would you like to launch his book? And I'm like, I said, I don't do book launches. Like, that's not my thing, but I'd love to do it. And she said, yeah, well, he's gone through HarperCollins for all of the previous books. This is the first book that he wants to self-publish, and we got to find someone who can help launch it. And I saw what you did and looked on this YouTube video, and then she sent me an email. You know, they're in California in the States, and she sent me an email to a random person on the other side of the world in Melbourne, Australia. And all the email said, it said, call me, and then had her phone number. And then
it sounds like a booty call, not a business opportunity.
Yeah,
she's up at like 2 a.m. lonely.
That's right. Couldn't say no to the booty call. Like, it would have been a very long commute.
Just don't let your wife find out about that, though, right?
Yeah. But, so I responded and then followed that, and that opened up. Like, I just followed that rabbit hole, and it was a wild journey of helping him launch his book and just seeing what he had built. Like, the guy's a little over 80 now, and he'd kind of built up a lot of cred at that point in time. And I just kind of got a peek into what it's like to have created that amount of goodwill and value, and the relationships that he's built, and how quickly I could knock on someone's door and say, oh, can you help with this? Or do you want to interview him for that? And people were falling over themselves to sort of join in the project. And it was just an amazing experience to be able to work with him so closely and just get insight. Like, he's a very creative person. Like, that was probably the other big thing that I learned going through that process. He is a visionary creative, and he's known as the systems guy, but he doesn't really like systems. Like, he doesn't like creating them. It's like he fell in love with what the systems can do, not the actual process. And I found that was really good for me to hear and see firsthand, because I'm a visionary creative as well. Like, I don't love writing systems and processes, but I'm a business owner, and I know that all great businesses have systems at their core, and I know that it's the master skill. Like, we're talking about, if time is the most limited resource you've got, and you can figure out a way to identify a task and make that repeatable and transferable, and you get paid every time that task is repeated, that kind of made me realize how important it is. And it's about building the right team around you so that you can do your great work as the business owner, um, without necessarily having to get caught up in the documentation. So while I am the systems guy, I kind of smile when I hear that. Like, I get systems and I see in terms of systems and I systems think, but also it's not the actual creating of the systems, and that it's not something I really enjoy.
Does anybody enjoy the creation of systems? I mean, it's not the funnest thing. I think that's why it's very seldom talked about. That's why, because
Yes.
sales is fun because you make money, and marketing is fun because you get that instant dopamine hit. It's dopamine, 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 but there's no dopamine at all with systems. But you said it before. I don't think, like, no one's really like a systems guy at heart, in terms of, we don't just love building systems for the sake of it. But I think when you run a business, you end up having to become a systems guy,
Yeah.
because you're not a systems guy until you burn out or until you waste a shitload of money, like one of those two
Yeah.
things. And I've done both. And I was like, I wish that I had this. And I was like, this is your fault. I wish this was out, like, there you go, I can put it on screen, like 5 years ago. Because I don't know if you know, man, but like, I've burnt out a number of times. My whole thing's my work ethic. Like, that's how I got by. I'm
Yeah.
not smart. I'm not talented. I don't have any of that. I just worked harder than everyone else, right? Just doing 100-hour weeks. And funnily enough, you burn out pretty quickly doing that. And
Yeah.
so one thing we've had to do, and over the last, really a year and a bit, our business is like going on like 4 times the size it was a year ago. It's the biggest thing has been systems and
Mm.
automation and implementing like steady flows, repeatable processes and whatnot, which has been an absolute game changer. And in this, like, you in the book, in Systemology, you discussed a couple of really, really key concepts around building out systems. So I guess if we've got
Mm.
someone in here who's perhaps a small business owner who is, maybe James Cant 2.0, working a whole heap, burning out, stressed, anxious, all that sort of stuff, and wants to be able to have more freedom, maximize profits, minimize any, well, if you don't have systems, you lose money too. There's heaps of
Mm.
cracks and gaps. Where would you recommend that they start?
Mm. The key is, most visionaries, business owners. So 2 or 3 things I want to touch on. One, you had mentioned, who's the systems guy really, right? And that comes from the mind of the business owner who creates. They're that visionary creative who might see a problem in the world. They create a business that helps to be the solution for that problem. They paint the picture in their head of what their business is going to look like in the future. And that's kind of what they do. There are actually yins to your yang, which is, there's people who think in terms of systems, who like creating systems, who are, managers who cross T's, dot I's, finish things through to completion, and understanding what you are, and then understanding what are the areas that you need to kind of make you even stronger, like fill out those areas where you're weak. Because a lot of people, they'll say this idea of, hey, you need to focus on your strengths, which very much true, but that doesn't mean that you then ignore the weaknesses. That means you then find the other pieces or the other people that can then fill in where you're weak. And businesses, if you think about business as one big system, and the health of that system, like the outcome, the money, the whatever that system throws off, depends on the health of the subsystems that sit underneath it. So if your business is one big system, then you underneath that, there's marketing, sales, operations, finance, management, and these are like little subsystems. And it's like the health of those systems will determine the health of your overall business. And just because you might be a gun salesperson and that's your strength, if you don't actually make the other areas strong, maybe the delivery of your product and service, or the marketing or whatever, if it's not all strong, the whole system is not strong. So when I realized that and realized that these systems are all interconnected and poor performing areas actually drag down other parts of the business, that's when I started to realize, hang on, we need to identify what those key systems are that drive the result in each of those different departments. And, we're not McDonald's, we're not making a hamburger business, and we haven't been doing this for 60 years. So we need to build the systems to suit the type of business that you're looking to build. Like, I love hiring A players who are well-skilled, who come with a bunch of knowledge, and they can fill in the gaps. I don't need to systemize every aspect of my business down to the point of, and at 5 o'clock, we tie up the rubbish and then we throw it in the front bin. Like that, you might do that if you're running a hamburger business, but I don't need to do that in the type of business that I'm building. So then it started making me realize, like, applying the 80-20. The aim of the game is, how do you find the minimum number of systems that deliver the bulk of the result for the business, and just go to work on those first. Now, in the book, an easy exercise that we start with is the critical client flow. And that has to do with identifying the linear journey that the client and the prospect and the client and the business goes through to deliver that product or service. That's a great starting point. But then beyond that, you then have to start to think about each of those departments. If you were to pick 5 or 6 systems in each department that would deliver the bulk of the result for that department, what are they? And then go to work on just those systems. So if you think about HR, it's recruitment, it's onboarding, it's managing. Okay, and there's maybe some handful of systems underneath that, and maybe there are some performance management, but there's a handful of HR systems that you just want to dial in really well. And then when it comes to marketing, well, what's marketing about? Marketing's about lead generation. Well, think about, what are your top 3 lead generation methods, and how can you turn it into a system so it's repeatable and can be done consistently without key person dependency? Because what most small business owners and small businesses suck at is repeatability. They're inconsistent. It's up and down. It depends on the person, depends on how they're feeling, depends if they're working or not working. Yet marketing is a function that needs to happen 24/7, 365
the
days
standard
a week.
small business cycle is like, you have your best ever. It's what's it? It's the best month fallacy or paradox, whatever you call it, where you go and have a record month and you have record profits, and then your next month is your worst straight after that.
Yeah, and it's because when you're in work mode, if it's just you or you've got a small team or the business is built around you, you're focusing on doing the work. Then the work comes to an end and you need to think about the next job. And we all know with marketing, it takes time to get people into your funnel, to warm them up, to be ready. So you actually want to be marketing all the time. So there's people already sitting in your funnel ready to go. And when you get that next work done, you've already started queuing up what your next job's going to look like. And the only real way to do it is through systems. And again, the more and more I look at business, and why I get excited by systems and why I go, it is the thing, is because it is the master skill. Like, if we think about what a business owner needs to do, they need to, and Dan Sullivan talks about this, we make it up, make it real, make it recur. And business owners are great at making stuff up and solving the problem and going, oh, this is how we're going to do it. And they can even sometimes move it to make it real because they're the first person to do it. Maybe whatever the task is in their business, they do it the first time. That's making it real. The bit that you really want to master is the make it recur, because the make it recur is where the money is. That is the asset that you once created. You do work once and then you continue to get paid for it. And it's a culmination of all of these little 1%ers, these little systems that all contribute to a bigger win. And I mean, this idea of at what point do 1%ers, like if 1%ers don't, have that much of a big impact in the moment, and when you zoom right down to it, at what point do the 1%ers add up to then having significant impact? There is a tipping point that happens, and you start working on and you build these systems and it becomes part of your culture, and you put a few more systems in, and then you reach a critical mass. And at some point, I've seen it so many times now, the business will just take off like a rocket, because you get, it's almost like reaching what we call minimum viable systems. You need to figure out what is the minimum number of systems that drive your business and focus doggedly on that, because that's what a business owner should be doing. You're building a machine, and that can only be done with systems.
And so if we're going through that standard small business cycle of yo-yoing up, down, but also the other one, this is what we hit. So we got to a stage where we got to a certain amount of size, which it was a good size business, but it's just like we were capped and couldn't go on to the next stage. And it's like you sit at this plateau for however many months, and then you work, and then bang, all of a sudden it comes through. So what you're saying is that if you're at that plateau and you can't actually get forwards, it means that you may not have that critical mass of 1% as that critical mass of systems, which then allows you to go to the next level. Is that right?
Yeah. And the way that, if you think about building, we talked about the system, and your business is one big system. Imagine that system working independently of you, because what tends to happen is the business owner works inside the system and they start solving the same problem again and again and again. They have to tell staff, oh, keep doing that. And they have to remind people, and they're constantly solving the same problem over and over and over and over. What you want to do...
Sounds like every small business ever.
Yeah. And this is part of the rite of passage. Like that, you have to go through that. But you've got to be careful not to get stuck there. And most small business owners get stuck there. What you need to do is solve it at a system level, solve it once and for all, because the best work that the business owner can do is solving problems, but not solving the same problems over and over. The business owner does the best work when they're separate from the machine. They can look back in on the machine. They can analyze it and go, that's the problem right there. Let's go to work on that piece of the machine, and then step back out again. So sometimes, like you said, you grow and then you reach a plateau. If the machine can continue to operate when you hit that plateau, and as a business owner, you're able to step out of the mix and then look back on the machine, it becomes much easier to solve the problem, because every problem within business is actually a systems problem, or at least that's one of my core beliefs. That, and with whether that's true or not, I don't know, but at least it makes it solvable for me. If I say that every problem is a systems problem in business, well, now I can go to work on the system to solve that problem, and then go, I don't have enough leads. Well, I must have, some poor lead generation methods. I'm having trouble converting. Well, maybe my sales process needs work. I'm having trouble with cash flow. Well, maybe I have some cash flow systems I need to put in place. Every problem in business is a systems problem. And as you elevate and grow in business, the problems don't stop. It's just that the quality of the problem gets better and better and better, or bigger and bigger and bigger. You kind of get to work on more interesting problems. But this is the game that business owners sign up to. They are problem solvers. We just need to figure out, how do we make your solutions recurable and repeatable so that you don't keep on solving the same problem. That's why I call it the master skill that every business owner needs to learn, because it's the way to extract the maximum value from your unique ability as a business owner, which is to solve problems.
I think you cover most of this in here in systemology. It's funny. I'm actually sending a copy over to our CEO over in New Zealand, because this hits the nail on the head for a lot of our stuff. Where, if someone's listening and they're like, fuck, that sounds like me. If they're in a small business, which is going up, down, hasn't hit that critical mass of systems yet, where can they grab a copy of this, or where can they learn more about you and what you do?
Yeah, best just to head over to Amazon. If you're listening to this, you're an audio book person, so search Systemology. There's an audible version of the book, or you can get the physical book if you prefer. And then if you want to go a bit deeper, just systemology.com. We've got some different resources, videos and tools and things like that to kind of help keep this moving for you. The key, like if I look back on the purpose of this episode, is really just to kind of relight that fire in you around systems. The person listening to this, if you had thought, hey, I've tried systems once before and it didn't work for me, I'm not really a systems guy or girl, and you, for whatever reason, you've reached some of those conclusions, I want you to retest those assumptions. And I want you to look back at this, because you can't build a great business without it, that works beyond you. There is no path around this. At some point, you're going to have to solve it. And if you keep on saying, yeah, I'll get to the systems later, I'll get to the systems later, it only gets harder and harder and harder, because you get more and more stuck in your ways. Your new team members that come on board don't have that systems thinking and that culture and that mindset. So I just hope that, whether it's getting the book or whatever it is that gets you going, start to think in terms of systems. If you're a business owner, stick with it for at least 12 months. Give it a solid go for 12 months. And I guarantee you'll see enough results to go, we got to be doing this for the rest of our lives, because that's what business and that's what life is about.
Totally. Dude, thank you so much for coming on. This has been really fun.
Yeah. Appreciate it.
Appreciate your time, man. Thank you.